It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, and the first of our community speakers. This is someone, if you've been around in the Vendure community for any amount of time, you will know who this is. He's the guy who writes all the best plugins. He's a really long-time Vendure contributor. We've worked together for years now.
4 years or something.
4 years, yeah. 4 years. This is the first time we met in person, so that's amazing. This is what's so good about these events. He's a member of our open source community team. There's a lot of work on triaging the many, many issues that you're all opening on GitHub. And he's here to share the lessons he's learned after 4 years of working with Vendure. Please give a very warm welcome to Martijn.
All right, thank you. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm happy to be here after such a time. Today I'm going to talk to you about some lessons learned. I've learned over the past few years, and I've named this talk with the subtitle A Brief History of Mistakes, because this is unfortunately how you learn most things, right? By making a few mistakes. Let me first introduce myself and start my timer to see how long this talk will take. So my name is Martijn. I live in Leeuwarden in the Netherlands, and I started PineLab about 4 years ago, I think. This is me with my partner Sophia and our son Elias. And as I said, I started PineLab about 4 years ago. I had a similar tech stack in my day job. It was using Nest.js and TypoRan. And then I ran into Vendure and thought, I should probably do something with this. I'm familiar with the tech stack. I had a lot of questions around me from people asking if I could build them a web shop. Up until recently, it has been mostly me with some freelancers doing the PineLab stuff. But recently, Niels joined as co-founder. He's also here in the audience. And I'm going to try and scale up PineLab as a proper agency in the coming years. So hopefully you will hear more of us. A little thing about PineLab. I think it's always good to start off with a quote, right? That's hip to start in your talk. Open source is not just about technology. It's about humanity's ability to solve shared problems collaboratively with transparency and accountability. A quote from Mark Surman from the Mozilla Foundation. So this one resonated with me a lot because I think it's good that you work together on an open source project to get problems solved in a proper way. I'm always thinking that I have a good solution to a problem, but after discussing with some people from the community, it seems that maybe a different solution is a better solution. And this happens when you collaborate on the open source software stuff. And the other part about it is accountability. People seem to behave more proper when it's out in the open, when they write GitHub issues and write public code that everyone can review. People tend to be less messy and more professional. That's also something I like about working with the open source software. With PineLab, we focus on or small to medium-sized businesses, and we do the complete part. So we deploy Vendure on Google Cloud usually because that's what we're familiar with, and all of our plugins that we build are also like scratch your own itch. So those are plugins that we use for our clients, because this is the only way we can actually have the level of quality for the plugins if we actually use them in production. I think it's similar to what David said before in the talk. If you use it yourself, it's much easier to maintain high quality of your software. A funny thing about this quote, I used ChatGPT and I actually can't find the source. So maybe Mark Surman never actually said this. But it's still a good quote that resonates with me, so let's still use it, right? As far as I'm aware, Mark Surman is still the president of the Mozilla Foundation, so that's, I hope that is still true. A small disclaimer before we start, because this is just a bunch of lessons learned that I've learned with PineLab over the past years, and your mileage may vary because some of the solutions to these problems or the lessons learned are very opinionated, so they don't go for everyone. Maybe if you have a super large client with a near infinite budget, then you would solve things differently. But this is just part of our opinion. Also, because there are separate topics, feel free to interrupt me if you have questions after each topic, because in the next topic we will dive into the next subject, and then it doesn't make sense to have all the questions at the end. So feel free to ask me any questions during the talk. So first we're going to start with the multi-tenant silver bullet, about multi-tenancy in Vendure and how we use that. The second point is two stock systems, is that twice as good? The insignificance of rounding, all SEO improvements are worth it, and the async collaboration, what we've learned from that. You might see a little theme in these topics is maybe that it's a bit sarcastic, maybe, and we'll find out if that's actually the case or not in a bit. So the multi-tenant silver bullet, let me give you an introduction about what that means, what we're going to discuss here. I think like 4 years ago, I was a developer working his day job, and he wants to have a side business, of course, right? Like every developer wants to have. What kind of side business? You would like to have some kind of SaaS product, probably, like 80% of the developers would like, I think. And my idea was to have like a sort of a mini Shopify where we can have multiple storefronts on Vendure, so that we only have to maintain one single Vendure instance and code base. That seems like a good idea. I'm also the CMO of PineLab, the Chief Meme Officer, so you'll find a few memes here as well. Not as many as in David's talk, but a few. This one from a classic from South Park. The phase 1 was to build infinite shops with the channel feature, some unknown part, and somehow we have to make a profit out of that, right? So the first setup, the initial version, is the one you see here right now. We just have one single Vendure instance, so a single server. It could be multi-instance on Google Cloud or Amazon, that doesn't really matter. But the important part is that you have one database and you have the multiple channels set up. So we use the channel feature of Vendure to host the multiple storefronts. So each channel is its own store, and then on this part you still have your custom storefront. So you could build custom storefronts for the channels, but the backend would actually be one Vendure endpoint. Why is this good? Well, for maintenance it's easy, right? Because you have a single code base. You can develop and test a feature on that instance, and when you build it for one client, you can reuse that or resell it to other clients as well, because it's already on that instance. And maybe you can use feature flags or a setting in the UI to enable that feature for other channels as well. How we did it was using permission. So you assign, for example, the invoices generation permission to a client, and then he sees the settings for the invoices plugin. And the other thing is you have your CI/CD setup. That's also just one CI/CD setup for deploying all these shops. And the other benefit of this is that you have the shared hosting. So you have one resource pool, and all the shops, if they don't peak at the same time, but have different peaks at different times, then they can use the same resource pool, and that would be cheaper for most. To give you an example of that, we have one instance still running like this, and that has like 10 web shops, and I think a testing database and a production database, and it's like 180 euros a month on Google Cloud Run. So I think that's pretty cheap for 10 shops. It depends on the size, of course. These are not super large shops, but it's still beneficial. I think cheaper hosting than when you would have each of their shops their own hosting instance. What are the downsides of this multi-tenant setup? So we also ran into some limitations because things like tax rates, zones and countries are configured in the database, so you cannot configure them channel specific. And The customizable strategies are all the same because we use the same code base for all the clients. We cannot have different order processes for each client. Why is tax rates and zones a problem? So in the Netherlands, I think this is also in other European countries. If you sell above a certain threshold to a different country, you have to apply the tax rate of that country. But some other clients might not reach that threshold, so they don't have to pay the German taxes, for example, for German customers. So there's a difference between companies in how the tax rates are calculated for consumers. And this can be a problem if you have the multi-tenant setup and you only have one database with one set of zones and countries. So we move to a second version of the multi-tenant setup, and it's a bit of a hybrid approach actually, because you have two Vendure instances and we still use the same code base, but for example over here you see the customer with more complex needs has his own database, so we can configure different zones and different tax rates for that customer. But of course you lose the benefit of having shared hosting, because now it's just a separate instance, and hosting wise that's not any different compared to when you have a separate code base on a separate Vendure instance installed. So the benefit goes away. The benefit that you gain is the tax rate, zones and countries that are now configurable. But we still have the customizable code part, which is not customizable. So you have the order process is still global on the Vendure instance. Sorry? Yeah, correct. So we still have the same, just one single code base, and the benefit of that is that the maintenance is a bit easier.
Sorry, let me just interject. For questions, because we've got the live stream, I'm gonna, if you have a question, if you raise your hand, then I will come with the mic, and then the live stream audience can also hear it. Okay.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so the question here was if the code base was the same. And yes, for this instance, or for this multi-tenant setup, we used one single code base deployed to multiple Vendure instances. And in our case, it's also that when you push a change, it will be deployed on all Vendure instances at the same time. But please test it on test first, before you do that. So the multi-tenant setup and code. So this is an example of the order code generation. We have one client that would like to have the date inside the order code, because then you have a bit more meaningful order code for the customer, which is understandable. But other clients would like the shorter default order code. So what you can do is like have if statements for different settings of the channels. So it is possible, but it's not optimal when you have the same code base and you have more than 10 different order code strategies. It becomes a bit messy. So this is a trade-off you have to make. Besides that, it's also not only the order code strategy, but we have email handling, the order item calculation strategy, text strategies, things like this. There's plenty of categories that are all code-based, so you have to be aware of that when you're using a single code base for multiple clients. So the conclusion for us is, for small similar projects, this is great because you have the maintenance benefit and the hosting benefit. It's for shops that are not expected to change much, because if you have a lot of heavy customization, it becomes problematic to have a single code base. Projects with heavy customization and business that expected to grow is maybe not suitable for this type of setup. Business-wise, for us as PineLab, this is nice for maintenance and hosting, but the downside is these are smaller shops who usually don't need too much customization, and there's the alternatives as Shopify and Wix. And the bottom part, where Vendure is actually really good at, that's are the clients we would like to have, because they have ongoing development and they have less alternatives to choose from because they have the heavy customization. And this is what PineLab focuses on right now. David already explained it a bit. I think it's for us also tech-savvy customers coming from WooCommerce or Magento and get stuck within that framework, and they've already decided that they want Vendure, which makes it easier for us to sell it to them because they already know that they want Vendure. And we focus on a bit smaller clients because we do the complete package for those clients with hosting and everything in between. So the clients are a lot smaller than what Eleventic is focusing on. And we have the conclusion of the conclusion of the conclusion. You can still use the multi-tenant setup for a lot of other different use cases. So what we are doing currently is we have some clients that are not super large, but they would like to have the wholesale and retail shops in the same Vendure instance, and they don't want the hassle and or spend the budget to set up another Vendure instance. And they usually have the same products, but different requirements, like we sell the same products, but for a different price and only in multiples of 4, because they come in boxes of 4, for example. For this, the channel feature is perfect, so we still use it a lot for that. Marketplaces, that's not something we focus on, but it's been also mentioned a lot on Discord and by Michael, I think, that it's perfect for marketplaces. And the other thing is for some niche, if you have very similar niches, like maybe a car repair shop or something like this, you can have one set of features that is the same for all of these smaller businesses because it's not their core business. They just sell car parts, for example, and it will probably be similar in the same country. Any questions about the multi-tenant setup? Because we're going to move on to the next subject after this one. All right. We're going to move on to the next meme. I think most of you might have already encountered a similar integration like this. What happens when you have two stock systems? We've integrated Vendure with order picking platforms, and a lot of the order picking platforms also do stock management because that's what that platform is for, right? As you can maybe guess from this picture, the conflict will be who is responsible for managing this stock. So this topic will be a bit shorter because the solution was for us pretty simple. Let me explain you the problem a bit. So in Vendure, when an order gets placed, you send it to the order picking platform, and the order picking platform decides when an order is shipped. Because people in the warehouse are packing the order, they send it, so when they say it's shipped, that should be seen as the truth, right? The package is probably shipped if the order picking platform says so. When the order is shipped, you get a webhook to Vendure. That's how we implemented it. And if something due to either concurrency or a mismatch in Vendure, the stock allocation has changed in Vendure in the meantime, then you might end up with a scenario where you could not fulfill the order in Vendure because Vendure also checks the stock allocation and the free stock. The solution for this problem for us was pretty simple, and we didn't even have to do much customization for this one. You can just configure the default order process to not check fulfillment states. And what this does is to allow you to just have an order that's in payment settled state to transition it to shipped, and that's it. Vendure will not check any of the allocation and free states. You do end up with stock still being allocated because Vendure doesn't deallocate it. I'm not sure if that is the right term, but it will not calculate the new allocated stock and the free stock. But most order picking platforms will also send you a webhook to Vendure saying this is the new stock status. We've handled this order and you now have 0 allocated items and 99 free items. And Vendure will just accept this as the new truth. So that will also solve that problem of having stock allocated indefinitely. Any questions about this topic? That's a good thing, I think, if there are no questions. So let's move on to the next one. Order line rounding versus unit rounding. This one took me quite a bit of reading and mental effort to wrap my head around. Another nice meme. In some cases, 99 cents will be the same as 99,173 blah blah cents, which is not always what you'd like to happen. So let's imagine this example where we have an item that is €1.20 with tax, and the item without tax in 21%, which is an annoying tax percentage in the Netherlands, because you have a lot of these rounding issues. is 99 cents, but it's actually the 99 cents we're seeing here because it's not actually 99 cents. Why is this a problem? This is a problem because you display prices to your customer in cents. It doesn't make sense to show them the 99 cents, 173. That's not good user experience, right? As you can maybe already see from this picture, if you use the price without tax as 99 cents, then the 5 items of 99 cents will be 4.95, which adds up, so that's correct. But if you calculate back from the total with tax 6 to what the amount without tax should be, you end up with 4.96, or if you use this one as base and add the tax percentage to it, it will result in 5.99 instead of 6. So customers will say like, hey, where's this extra 1 cent coming from? Are you scamming me? What's going on? Yeah, you can see it here in Vendure as well. It's a bit more clear because you have the price with tax and price without tax everywhere. So you can figure out what's going wrong, but it will still be complex to an ordinary customer, right? Order line routing is a different method of handling these rounding issues, and this is what some external platforms use. We ran into this with Molly, but I'll dive into that a bit after this one. You use the quantity times the price excluding tax, but you actually use the 99 cents with all the extra numbers, right? And then you end up with the correct amount, 4.96. But the customer will now see that 5 times 99 cents is 4.96, which is also not correct. So you have to work around that. They will again say, hey, you're scamming me for another 1 cent. Why is this a problem with integration? So Molly is expecting you to send, Molly is the payment provider, I'm not sure if everyone knows this. Molly requires you to send all the order line amounts to Molly. So you use the price with tax, price without tax, and the total with tax, total without tax. And it needs to add up, because otherwise Molly say, oh, this doesn't add up, it's wrong. And the way Vendure calculates the order totals, which is not incorrect, is on unit rounding. But Molly just made the decision to do it based on the order line, so it doesn't add up. And then it fails to create a Molly order, which in turn makes that customers can't pay, which is a serious problem in your webshop, right? That's not what you want. Similar goes for accounting platforms. They can also have the rounding issues, but the problem there is a bit easier, or the solution there is a bit easier. It is that you have an extra line item for rounding differences. The people from the accounting software actually took that into account, that this can happen. For Molly, the solution is that they're moving back to the payments API, which is nice. They just require you to send a total amount to the payment provider, and they don't care about your order line amounts anymore, which I think is the right decision, because it doesn't make sense to have this in two systems. What is the solution on your storefront and on invoices? So for business to business, you should just use the price excluding tax as base and communicate that to your customer, and only show the total with tax in the totals, so that it doesn't create a wrong expectation from your customer. And you can set your channel setting in Vendure on use prices, prices include tax for default zone, and you turn it off, and then you work with the tax prices excluding, or the prices without tax, instead of automatically have them included with tax. And for consumers, it's the other way around. You use the price with tax, so you use the 120, and you set your channel setting on use prices including tax. It's a simple setting, but it took me quite a while to wrap my head around it, so that's why I'd like to include it in this talk. Are there any questions on this topic? This is still the example where you see that everything does add up because you don't show the prices excluding tax, only the total excluding tax, and then it still adds up. Any questions regarding the order line versus unit line rounding versus unit rounding? All right. Moving on to the next meme. End-to-end testing is overrated. I was not used to write that much tests, because I was working in smaller teams usually, and we just did some manual testing and break stuff in production. It was fine. And I thought we'd do that same with the plugins again at Pine Lab. We can manage it, but it is not. You should not do it. I'm not sure if the small text on the left is readable, but it might sound familiar to some of you. Requires the order lines relation to be joined, and I'll explain to you about how you get that error. So what we've done in some unit tests is this example. It's a very simple example. We have the function sum of discounts, and it just sums up the discounts of an order. In this case, it's only 10, so in total will be expected to be 10. In your unit test, this all works because you pass it in an order and it will sum the discounts. But what happens when you fetch the order directly from the type program repository instead of the order service, for example, and you don't want to also fetch the order lines on the order for performance reasons maybe, it will throw an error because you cannot get the discounts on an order if the order lines are not joined. Which makes sense, but if you don't know it and your unit test is succeeding, you might think, okay, this is going to work, and push it to production. How would you solve this? You just have to write unit or end-to-end tests instead of only unit tests. The next one is a bit similar. There are default relations when you fetch an order, also from the order service, and a shipping method on a shipping line is not a default, which makes sense for performance reasons, but sometimes you might want to have the name of the shipping method attached to the shipping line. So this function that's being unit tested, the list shipping method, maybe a bit of a weird example, but it lists the names of the shipping methods, just for the sake of this example, right? And if you pass it in the mock order that you see above, then everything will be fine in your unit test. But if you use it in production, or maybe in your end-to-end test, you might get the error that you cannot reprint the name of undefined. And why is that? It's because the shipping method part that you see on the shipping line is not loaded by default. So what you should do in this case is, again, of course, end-to-end test. And you can fix this by using the entity hydrator. The entity hydrator also checks if a relation already exists. And if it exists, it doesn't do anything. So there won't be any performance degradation on that side. What we have learned from this, unit test for complex stuff. This is not really Vendure specific, right? I think it's general programming advice maybe. Unit test for complex util functions without dependencies, and use Vendure testing. There's a lot of gold in the Vendure testing library as well. You have the SQLite server set up so you can easily test everything end to end without setting up a Postgres server or whatever. You have the admin GraphQL client, shop client. You can do post requests with those as well. I'd advise you to just dive into the code and see what's there. There's a lot of useful stuff that saves you from a lot of scaffolding in your tests. And the last point, of course, is to automate it, because you will at some point be confident and say, like, I don't have to manually run my test, I'll just push it to production. And this has saved me numerous times, because I've thought a lot of times, this is such a small change, we can just push this to master and all the tests will succeed anyway. And I've actually made it so that I have to do a pull request before I can merge something into the plugins now, because then it will run the tests automatically. And more often than not, something fails and the end-to-end test catches it for me, which is a blessing. Any questions about the end-to-end testing or unit testing in Vendure context?
You mentioned that you need test basically your components without dependencies.
The unit test.
A unit test.
Yeah, correct.
How do you do that? How do you?
I use the v-test framework as well. So I try to, maybe before I implement it, already think about what I'm going to unit test and write that as a pure function somewhere where I pass everything into the pure function and only get the result back. That is my preferred way of doing it, but sometimes you need stuff like the product variant service to mock or something. That can also be the case. Yeah. Does that answer the question enough?
Yeah, definitely. We've been in this shoe for a couple of times, of course. And basically what we opted for is definitely the DI system of Nest, basically using that for mocking. And yeah, and you mentioned that you are mocking as well. Do you use the Nest DI or something similar?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Nest.js DI system, basically the Nest has this create testing module.
I have not used that before. No, I use for the end-to-end test mainly the Vendure testing package, and for unit testing just the pure function, the utility functions. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the separation we have right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Thanks.
But I'm going to look into it, and that sounds promising as well. Yeah. Any more questions? No. All right. This one's maybe the most opinionated of them all. All SEO improvements are worth it. This one may seem very obvious to many of you and to us as well in hindsight, but when we implemented it, we thought it would be easy. So what we were thinking is for the storefront URL structure, we would have collections also in the URL, because there's a little bit of SEO benefit if you have the collection in your storefront URL as well, instead of just having product / super cool Patagonia shirt, which is then the slug of your product. The expectation was to have a small SEO win, and the implementation is pretty easy, right? But you have shop owners as well who are maybe not developers, and they will change things, which is what it's for, of course. What happened in our case, which we could have foreseen obviously, is that people are assigning products to different categories, which should be possible, of course. But this resulted in our case in this page is not being found anymore. A product detail page had one URL yesterday, and today the URL changed, and there was no automatic redirect, so that resulted in 404s. This is, as you can imagine, not so good for your SEO performance. Another problem we had was that maybe not all products were changed inside a different collection or moved to a different collection, but we had implemented the primary collection plugin, because a product can be in multiple collections at once, and to create the URL you want to have like a primary collection. So that's the one you use in your breadcrumbs and in your URL. But some products did not have a primary collection, and the shop owner did what he thought was the right thing, to assign a primary collection to the product, but this then turned out to be different than the one that was automatically used, which was just the first collection in the list as a fallback. Of course, all of these things are, you can solve all of these problems because you can create automatic redirects, like similar to how WordPress does it, but it can get a bit complex if you're working with headless. You have to implement your own solution, and the short answer for us was we just moved back to the /product slug and spent our time and maintenance hours into actually building new features instead of making a redirect service, which is only a small SEO benefit, if proven at all, because most SEO things are a bit magical and no one knows the exact significance, I think. Oh yeah, sorry.
Long URL is better for SEO?
The reasoning,
Because I thought the opposite is true, but it's all black magic SEO, so.
yeah, so the point of the longer URL structure, so let me grab that one again, is that you get a bit of more context of the product. So by looking at the URL, you can see that the super cool Patagonia shirt is part of clothing and t-shirts. So that gives you a bit more context about the product, what kind of product it is. And that's the reasoning behind having the longer. Maybe longer is not good, but it has more context in the URL.
Thanks.
All right. How we solve that now is you still have breadcrumbs and structured data on your product detail pages, so you can still tell Google what collection your product is in without changing the URL. There's more ways to do it than just the URL. Any questions regarding the URL structure? All right. Moving on to the final topic. I ran out of good memes, so this is what you have to do with. This one is about async collaboration. So it's about working on open source project through issues, pull requests. Maybe even it even goes further than that about working remote with remote developers, and you have to do a lot of your email and different time zones. For me, I was not used to this. I was used to working in companies where you just meet all day. You just like 30% of your day is meetings, and when you have a question, you just invite 10 people and ask your questions and keep them from their work for a few hours. Fortunately, I've learned now to handle things differently by working on an open source project. And one of the things I was struggling with at the beginning is when you report an issue, you are inclined to say, the assets are broken, fix it for me. Because you've already spent like 4 days on the issue and you need some help. I've included this in this talk because I think it takes a bit of practice to get good at this async collaboration model. The things I've learned personally from contributing to Vendure, or maybe even having people create issues for the Pineapple plugins, is clear writing leads to clear thinking. This is one of the quotes from the Getting Real book from the Basecamp guys. I think many of you might have read that one. And what they say in this part is, if you are struggling to define your problem in text, in a few simple to understand questions, then you might not understand the problem correctly, and you have to dive in yourself a bit deeper to make it easier for the person reading your issue to actually understand what's going on. So if it's hard to write it down, then you might need to dive into it a bit more. For me, an important part was who will be reading the issue. I've already spent 4 days on an issue, so I just type it without context in GitHub saying, okay, this is what's wrong. But now I really have to think about, okay, who's going to read it? It will be other contributors, and they have not spent 4 days on this issue. So they need to understand how I got to this issue and how to make it reproducible, right? And my favorite one is maybe to be like sort of like a book writer, like an editor. You have to reread your message, make it maybe a bit simpler, remove some sentences, make it easier to read. This doesn't only go for issues, but also for email, for Slack, and when you're working with people from different time zones. You don't want to have the overhead of asking a question, they ask something back the next day, then it will easily take a week before you get where you want to be. At the end, when it's easier to understand, it's easier for someone else to pick it up as well. And that's probably what you want if you're reporting an issue, right? And the final lesson learned for this one is that you should probably just start contributing to Vendure. Just read some issues, read the pull request, and you'll get a bit of a feeling about what it's like to read the issues or to maybe contribute to the issues. And I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it just like I do. Because this grows the Vendure community, and that helps Vendure, which in turn will help you because most of you are probably using Vendure already. So it will also be good for you personally. That's it for my talk. Any more final questions? All right.
You said it all. Thank you very much, Martijn. That was an amazing talk. Lots of wisdom.
Thank you.
Hard-earned wisdom. All the best wisdom is hard-earned.
It's good to hear.